He was the silent heartbeat of Queen, the man behind the bass, behind the hits, behind the legend. While the world was captivated by Freddie Mercury's electric presence and Brian May's soaring guitar, John Deacon quietly held the band together. But after Freddie's death, Deacon disappeared almost entirely from the public eye. No interviews, no spotlight, no stage. For years, fans were left to wonder, what did Freddie's death truly do to him? And why did the man who helped write "Another One Bites the Dust" simply walk away from it all? Now, at 73, John Deacon is finally breaking his silence. And what he's revealing about his bond with Freddie Mercury will leave you absolutely stunned. From penning some of Queen's most iconic hits to turning his back on fame after Freddie Mercury's death, John Deacon built a legendary legacy, and then vanished. For decades, he remained silent, avoiding the spotlight while the rest of the world kept asking why. Now, at 73, that silence has finally been broken. And what Deacon has revealed about his friendship with Freddie has stunned even those who knew them best. To truly understand the weight of his words, we must go back to the beginning, to the story of a quiet genius from Leicester. Born on August 19, 1951, at St. Francis Private Hospital, John Richard Deacon entered a modest English household. His father, Arthur Henry Deacon, worked for Norwich Union Insurance, and his mother, Lillian Molly Deacon, nurtured a home where discipline, humility, and quiet ambition laid the foundation for one of rock's most understated legends. John Deacon's early life was shaped by both quiet tragedy and quiet brilliance. He had an older brother, Robert, who heartbreakingly passed away at just 6 years old, a loss that left a permanent scar on the Deacon family. Years later, his younger sister Julie was born, and in 1960, the family relocated to Oadby, a quiet town just outside Leicester. From a young age, John stood out, not for loud ambition, but for a quiet, intense curiosity. Friends called him Deeks or DC, but what truly defined him was his fascination with electronics. He devoured magazines, built homemade gadgets, and even modified a tape recorder to capture music directly off the radio, an early sign of the creative precision that would later make him a legend. He excelled academically, attending Linden Junior School, Gartree High, and later Beecham Grammar School, earning top marks across the board. But despite his scholarly success, John's heart beat strongest for soul music. It moved him in ways books never could. At just 14, he scraped together borrowed money to buy a rhythm guitar and joined his first band, The Opposition. He started as a guitarist, but when their bassist failed to improve and was kicked out, John took over the role, and never looked back. For 4 years, he played with the group as it evolved, changed names, and matured. Then, in 1969, he made a decision that would unknowingly steer him toward destiny. Accepted into Chelsea College in London to study electrical engineering, John left the band and stepped into a new chapter, one that would soon lead him to Queen and immortality. He even forgot to bring his bass guitar with him from Oadby because he thought that his singing days were over. But once they got to London, things changed again. John went to the Royal Albert Hall in September 1969 to see Deep Purple play. At the show with a full orchestra, something stuck with him. Even though he was still in school, it made him want to play music again. In 1970, a new group called Queen began to come together. Roger Taylor, Freddie Mercury, and Brian May had now joined forces and were looking for a bass. John saw them play live for the first time in October of that year. At first, he wasn't big on it and didn't think much of it. But music kept calling to him in the back of his mind. He even put together a short-lived band called Deacon and played at Chelsea College once. But things really changed for him when a friend put him in touch with Roger and Brian at a disco in early 1971. They were still trying to find the right bass. John talked to them and decided to try out. His fate was set after that tryout in a lecture hall at Imperial College. Along with being good at singing, he was calm, focused, and good with electronics, which is why the band liked him. John was the last piece of Queen, and that was it. Even though he was the youngest, he made the group more balanced. What happened next would go down in history. The day Queen was over. In 1971, after trying out a number of different bassists, Queen finally found John Deacon, who was the right fit for them. In June of that year, he played his first show with the band at the College of House Management in Kensington. The band needed someone like him. Smart and quiet at the same time. He wasn't the loudest person in the room, but he had a strong sense of what music he liked. The fact that he knew a lot about technology also helped the band with their gear, especially in the beginning when money was tight. He was called Deacon John instead of John Deacon on Queen's first album, which was interesting. The band thought it made him sound more interesting. John didn't like it, though. From the second album on, people saw him go by his real name because he asked to. John was very important to Queen's success, even though he seemed relaxed. He played more than bass. He wrote a lot of their best songs. He wrote songs like I Want to Break Free and Another One Bites the Dust. Still, he stayed out of the public eye. John talked to Music Star in 1974 about how it all started. To begin, Roger and Brian and I met at a club. I knew they were looking for a bass player, so I went over and talked to them. Since Freddie was already there, my joining was the last piece that put Queen together the way it is now, he said. Making the choice to go corporate was a big deal. But I really didn't think we'd ever do it, even though we played in our free time. Then we were lucky enough to be able to use a real studio to make a demo tape. When we showed it to record companies, they were interested enough in it to trust us. We tried it, but not everyone was sure at first. Freddie and Roger might have been the most interested. Brian was very interested in his work and studied physics and astronomy a lot. The other two, though, are born stars. Freddie is likely the one who pushed us the most to move on. The band had a lot of different types of people, but they worked great together. Who writes the songs and plays the strings? John Deacon did more than just build Queen. He could also write great songs. His first writing credit was on the third record by the band, Sheer Heart Attack, which came out in 1974. His song Misfire was fun and happy, and it had a Caribbean sound to it. John did more than just play bass on this track. He also played most of the guitar parts. There wasn't much music done because lead guitarist Brian May was sick with hepatitis and had to go to the hospital. John and the rest of the band also wrote the fast-paced Stone Cold Crazy together. John wrote something much more personal for Queen's fourth record, A Night at the Opera, the very next year. You're My Best Friend was the name of the sweet and sad song he wrote for his fiancée Olivia. It was a big hit, and it's still one of Queen's most loved tunes. John wrote one or two songs for every record after that, all the way through The Miracle in 1989 and Innuendo in 1991. On these later records, the band as a whole was given credit for writing the songs. In 1980, John wrote Another One Bites the Dust, which was one of his most important works. The dance-like feel of the song came from his early love of soul music. This song quickly became one of Queen's most popular. At the time, it was a big deal that it was played on both black and white radio stations in the U.S. John's smooth bass line helped give the song its memorable beat. Freddie Mercury and Deacon worked together a lot in the early 1980s. Their work together changed Queen's sound to be more disco-like. That work together was made real on the band's 1982 album Hot Space. John played bass guitar on the song Staying Power to add some of the soul and Motown style that he loved. But things didn't always go well. John wrote another song called Back Chat from the same record. He didn't want Brian May to play the guitar solos on that song. His style didn't seem to match the sound he was going for. This made things tense between them, and their argument got very heated. Unfortunately, Hot Space didn't do well at the box office, and Queen quickly went back to their rock sound on later records. John was busy even when he wasn't with Queen. Some well-known artists put him on their single, Picking Up Sounds, which he played bass on. He also played on Freddie Mercury's song, How Can I Go On, and worked on a song for the movie, Biggles, Adventures in Time. He worked with famous musicians like Elton John and Errol Brown from Hot Chocolate. John once said, I wouldn't be as happy if I had just been a bass player in a band my whole life. That's just part of what I do. Writing songs was just as important to him as playing bass. His music still does the talking. An artist who can do more than one thing. John Deacon did more for Queen than just be her bass. For the most part, he kept to himself in public, but he did a lot more behind closed doors. In fact, by 1973, Rolling Stone said that the energy between him and Roger Taylor, the drummer, was like an explosion, like a huge sound volcano. The strong sound wasn't just from the bass beats. He did it because he knew a lot about music. John often played the guitar while they were recording, especially when Brian May wasn't there. In the case of the record Hot Space, May didn't play the Fender Teller's sharp and clean sound, John did. He also liked to play the piano and write songs. A well-known Wurlitzer electric piano part in the song, You're My Best Friend, was written for his wife. You can see him play a big piano in the music video for Spread Your Wings. But on the song itself, Freddie played the part. John never sang lead like the other three Queen members did. He didn't even sing much on studio records. But when they played live, he would quietly add background vocals when they needed them. He always tried to blend in with the background while still giving it his all. John had certain tools that he liked the most. On the other team, his first bass guitar was an Echo. His next bass was a Rickenbacker 401, but for most of Queen's career, he played a Fender Precision bass. He changed the way it looked over the years, but it was still his main instrument. He moved to a bass made just for him by Roger Giffen near the end of his time with Queen. He used an Ernie Ball Music Man Stingray sometimes for live shows. John really stood out because he knew a lot about tech. He made gear for the band as an engineer. The DC amp was one of his most well-known inventions. He put it together with old parts he found in a trash can in 1972. It became a big part of Queen's sound, and Brian May used it on a lot of records. He used his fingers to play bass most of the time and a pick for a few songs. He liked music by Chic, Michael Jackson, and Stevie Wonder. Chris Squire from Yes and John Entwistle from The Who were his best bassists. It was best said in a report from 1975. A person who is new to Queen would only notice John Deacon's distinctive sound near the end. Deacon is one of the best musicians of his generation and the least famous member of Queen. Still, John never tried to be famous, even though he was very talented. But we need to look at the man who was at the center of Queen to understand why he left it all. Freddie Mercury was the beating heart of Queen. It was Freddie Mercury's voice that made Queen soar, his personality that wowed, and his heart that held the band together. He wasn't just the lead singer of the band, he was its heart. He was born as Pharaoh Bulsara and gave Queen a spark that no one else could match. He could sing in 4 different ranges, and his stage confidence was like nothing fans had ever seen. Freddie always made sure that everyone was looking at him, whether he was wearing a costume, a crown, or nothing but a mic stand. Brian May and Roger Taylor had already played together in a band called Smile before they joined Queen in 1970. All of that changed when Freddie joined them. He had big plans. He wasn't afraid to try new things with style, sound, or words. In fact, Freddie was the one who made the group dream bigger. Queen finally had a full group when John Deacon joined in 1971. After that, the magic started. Freddie helped Queen decide what kind of songs they would make. Songs like Don't Stop Me Now, We Are the Champions, and Bohemian Rhapsody were more than just hits, they were important times in the history of music. Opera and rock were mixed with piano and power, and soft and strong were mixed together. He wasn't scared of any type. Even though everyone in the band could write great songs on their own, Freddie gave Queen its bold and dramatic sound. It felt like a party at every show. Each phrase felt like it was about something specific. When he wasn't on stage, Freddie was known for being kind and helpful with the people he cared about. But he also liked to keep his personal life out of sight. He didn't talk much about his sexuality, health, or problems in his personal life. That privacy made the news he gave to the public in November 1991 even more upsetting. Freddie told everyone one day before he died that he had AIDS. Finally, everyone knew what he had been fighting so quietly and with such great strength. Freddie kept working even though he was sick. These Are the Days of Our Lives, his last movie with the band, was shot in May 1991. The video shows him looking weak but happy. Even when his body was giving up, he still did his best. That was his way of leaving without words. In the same year, Queen put out the album Innuendo, which was full of feeling, power, and haunting songs. It was clear that Freddie had put everything he had into those songs. By the end of 1991, the man who used to rule the stage was spending his last days in peace at home in Kensington. The day when the music stopped. Freddie Mercury died in the evening of November 24. He had made a public statement about his fight with AIDS the day before. He died in his London home at age 45, with his close friend Dave Clark by his side. Not only did the music world feel shocked by that loss. That shook Queen to its core. The service for Freddie's death was on November 27. An Arian priest led the private event. There were only 35 close family and friends there. People like Elton John, all of Queen, and John Deacon were among them. When his body was brought into the church, Aretha Franklin sang, "Take My Hand, Precious Lord," and "You've Got a Friend." It was the last goodbye, and it was a sad and respectful moment. He didn't just leave music behind. He gave away a lot of his money to good causes and left his wealth, which was worth about £8 million, to the people who were most important to him. Mary Austin, who had known him all his life, got his house, most of his personal things, and half of his shares. The rest was split between his sister and parents. He also gave a lot of money to close friends and family, like Joe Finelli, Jim Hutton, and Peter Freestone. Fred's Rolls-Royce was one thing that stood out. Because he never had a license to drive, he was always taken around London by a driver. The car was given to his sister after he died, and she drove it to events before selling it at sale in 2013 for £74,600. Fans began to gather outside of Freddie's house. They left flowers and notes and made a memorial on the outside wall of Garden Lodge. Time Out magazine said in 1994 that it had grown into London's largest rock and roll shrine. That's how the wall looked until 2017, when Mary Austin finally cleaned it. Still, the thought of Freddie and the silence that followed never went away. Also, John Deacon was hurt by Freddie's death in some way. Fans didn't understand why there was silence. But it made sense to people who knew him. John never cared about being famous. He wasn't trying to get noticed or make the news. He loved music and the people who helped him make it. For Freddie, it felt like the sound stopped when he died. Why John left. Roger Taylor and Brian May chose to keep Queen alive by working on new projects, playing with other artists, and honoring the band's history. John, on the other hand, chose not to do the same. He slowly pulled away from everything, including interviews, public life, and shows. By the late 1990s, he was no longer in the public eye at all. He did not show up at memorial shows. The man didn't talk to the press or put out any new songs. But behind the scenes, John didn't really quit. From what Brian and Roger say, he was still involved in business choices for Queen. He knew what was going on and gave his view when asked, but he did so from afar. His family didn't say anything either. They respected his choice to keep his life private. But some close friends and family have spoken out in the last few years. They talked about how much John's death touched them. It wasn't just sadness. There was a strong feeling of loss. The link that John and Freddie have there. The stage showed that Freddie Mercury and John Deacon were not at all the same. Freddie was loud, sure of himself, and full of life. John kept to himself and was calm and quiet most of the time. But they had something special off stage. A close friendship built on trust that a lot of people didn't see. Freddie once said, "He's kind of quiet. A lot of people think that, but don't underestimate him. He's fiery underneath all that. John was the last person to join Queen. Brian May and Roger Taylor were already good friends at that point. Freddie had also joined, and everyone could see that John's quiet personality was great for the band. But Freddie saw more in him too. Peter Freestone, who worked for and was friends with Freddie for a long time, says that Freddie took John under his wing because he was the new kid. He wasn't outgoing like Brian and Roger. He meant to keep him safe. When they were on tour, John and Freddie often went places together. They formed their own little team within the band over time. John stayed out of the public eye, but he had a say behind the scenes. John said, "Usually singers and guitarists are more outspoken, but behind the scenes, I can be as loud as anyone else." During the video shoot for "These Are the Days of Our Lives" in May 1991. "I think we've all been crazy at some point over the years. I can't say it's been easy, it's been hard at times. There have been good times and bad times when we fought and then made up. The band had some problems, especially when it came to writing songs, but later albums had songs credited to both Deacon and Mercury." Freestone thought this was because John was the only one who really understood how much Freddie had helped him grow. That friendship meant more than words. John was never the same after Freddie left. John Deacon started to leave the band after Freddie's death. He didn't talk to anyone. It got to the point where he quit going to events and making music altogether. Brian and Roger chose new ways to keep Queen alive, but John took a step back in the background. He did play with Queen 3 more times. First, he joined the band for a tribute to Freddie Mercury in April 1992. Then, he did a charity show with Roger Taylor in 1993. Finally, in 1997, he joined them again for The Show Must Go On at the opening of the Bart Ballet in Paris, where Elton John sang lead vocals. Later that year, they made a song together called No One But You, Only the Good Die Young. John would never record with the band again. In order to make the movie A Knight's Tale, Queen and Robbie Williams had to re-record We Are the Champions. John didn't hold back. He said the new one was trash. In 2001, when Queen was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he wasn't there. He didn't go on tour or record with Queen and Paul Rodgers. He lived a quiet life instead. Brian and Roger say he still has an opinion on Queen's business issues. John is still active, but only from afar. For example, when the Queen biopic Bohemian Rhapsody was being made, John gave his approval but chose not to be a part of it. Actor Joseph Modello performed him inside the film. His character additionally seemed within the parody film Weird, the Al Yankovic story. Is the BBC? I am relieved. You will be. No, ideal performance. However, John himself stayed out of the spotlight. His former college pal, Robert Awai, once said maybe he concept Freddie changed into the band, so what's the factor? He suffered from depression after Freddie died and I'm now not positive he has ever popped out of it. The final time John spoke for Freddie. In April 1992, simply 5 months after Freddie Mercury passed away, the world saw something unforgettable. Queen took the degree for one special cause, to honor Freddie. The Freddie Mercury tribute live performance at Wembley Stadium introduced collectively enthusiasts and mythical artists to have fun the person who had changed music for all time. That night, John Deacon did something rare. He spoke for the remaining time in public. He stood before a roaring crowd and allowed his heart do the speaking. Brian might also spoke first, promising the biggest send-off in history. Then Roger Taylor gave his thank you. Ultimately, it became John's turn. He said, "Hey." His voice slightly growing above the noise of the group. "To begin with, Brian, Roger, and I would really like to thank all the artists that will be performing right here nowadays in London. They've given their time and power to make this tribute to Freddie a fact to appear nowadays." His voice cracked. After which he added something that could stay with fanatics for all time. The show need to pass on. After that, he welcomed Metallica to the level. And that second, quiet and emotional, have become history. It wasn't just a live performance. It became a farewell. And for John, it turned into the begin of a goodbye that never definitely ended. The final goodbye. In 1997, Queen recorded one very last track as a band. No One However You. Handiest the Best Die Young turned into Made in reminiscence of Freddie. John joined Brian and Roger for the recording. It'd be the closing time all three of them labored collectively. After that, John disappeared from music completely. The motive, as proven in every reminiscence, give up quote become now not approximately fame or money. It turned into about love and loss. Freddie Mercury have been John's anchor inside the hurricane. And without him, John now not felt like he belonged. Even in latest interviews, Brian and Roger made it clear. John nonetheless watches over the enterprise aspect of Queen, but he doesn't want to be seen. He would not need to be heard. He surely desires peace. Brian once said, John Deacon remains John Deacon. We do not undertake something monetary without talking to him. But in public, he has vanished. No interviews, no images, no appearances, simply quiet. And that quiet now tells a tale of its very own. A story of deep friendship, quiet grief, and a man who chose to step far from the highlight as opposed to live in it without the buddy who made all of it profitable. Nevertheless a part of Queen. Despite the fact that John Deacon left public life, he by no means absolutely reduced ties with Queen. Brian May also as soon as stated, John Deacon remains John Deacon. We do not undertake anything financial without talking to him. In 2014, Roger Taylor stated that John had completely retired from any kind of social contact and was a bit fragile. Brian brought that they didn't have plenty touch, but John nevertheless taken care of the budget. He stored an eye fixed at the commercial enterprise despite the fact that he wasn't out on level or within the studio. In 2022, Brian spoke to Rock FM Spain. He said John had became down many offers to rejoin the band. Brian understood why. Things have modified plenty and Roger and I have adapted a sure amount. It is feasible that we could meet in a few low-strain scenario, I assume, however in public, likely no longer. Through the years, John has been remembered in unique approaches. In 2013, a new species of damselfly from Brazil became named Heteragrion John Diania in his honor. It turned into part of a tribute to all four Queen contributors, marking 40 years for the reason that band's first album. So even though he isn't always visible on stage, Jay's presence has never completely dwindled, he is still part of Queen, simply backstage. Nowadays, John Deacon lives a totally personal lifestyles. He chose to step far from the spotlight to focus on his circle of relatives and stay peacefully inside the same southwest London home he sold together with his first Queen paycheck. Buddies and previous bandmates have said he prefers to maintain to himself and does not attend public occasions. He hasn't backed to the degree and he hasn't given any interviews in years, but people who realize him say he is content. John still maintains up with Queen's enterprise subjects and offers enter whilst wanted, but handiest from a distance. He enjoys his privacy and continues to stay existence on his personal phrases, quiet, peaceful, and far from the noise. And even as Freddie Mercury is not with us, his spirit lives on inside the track, in the memories, and in the deep friendship he shared with John Deacon. A friendship that formed Queen and that even nowadays still leaves a mark. Do you suspect John Deacon made the proper decision by stepping away after Freddie's dying? And what is your favorite memory or track that reminds you of their bond? Percentage your thoughts inside the remarks beneath. And consider to hit like, subscribe, and live tune for greater high-quality tales from Hollywood's fascinating records. See you next time.